Well, welcome to the second professional development activity in this series that HBA Learning Centres is running. Now, before we go any further, I would like to pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. I pay my respect to their elders past and present, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Welcome, and for those of you who are new to what we're doing, you will be given a statement of attendance by email over the next few days. You save those in your professional development file, and you make notes in your professional development plan as to what you intend to look at next time round. I repeat, as I said before to you all, we're not trying to sell anything from this company. This is simply a service to the training and assessment industry as such, because we just felt that it would help everybody. There's no cost to what we are doing, and anybody is welcome to join, even those that are our competitors, and we have some here now, and we say welcome to you as well. As per last time, given your trainers, you're quite fearless. And to that extent, you'll see the little bubble on the top or even on the right-hand side of your page at the moment. And if you click on that, you're able to pose questions. And I have a team of people here that can help us. We have people here from every state and the Northern Territory and the ACT. In addition to that, we have people from several countries overboard. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on who you are. There's something around 370 people logged in to do this today, and I would like to take this moment in time to say thank you to the major accounts that our company has. Many of you are from our major accounts, and without you, we would cease to exist. Now, to help me today, I have people, as before, to help with the various things that have to occur. I've got Tim Fitzgerald, who's our national manager. He looks after all of the operations, so that if anything goes wrong, it's his fault, not mine. We have Neil Fowler and Julian DiFrancesco. They are our more senior TAE trainers. They're here to deal with your questions. And I must say, both of those gentlemen were flat out last time answering questions. And lastly, to tie it all together, we have Carol Vo. Carol looks after all of the thousands of learners we have to make sure that they can do their presentations or their assessments or whatever it is they require to be done. My commitment to you is this will be over before 5 o'clock, because it's Friday afternoon and I know you would rather be somewhere else than watching an old man on a screen in front of you. Now, the third session we run is on the 21st of May, and then we're going to take a break of a month, and then we'll announce 3 more sessions for you. Those of you who were on the first session, thank you very much. We received so many lovely emails, so many lovely phone calls, and I want to thank you for taking the time to do that, because you don't have to do it. Now, every country in this world has a hierarchy of qualifications. And if you think about what that hierarchy consists of, there are qualifications at the very top, there are qualifications up the bottom, and there are qualifications in the middle. And here in Australia, we have our own hierarchy of qualifications, and we call it the Australian Qualification Framework. Now, the Australian Qualification Framework has a number of levels. If I asked you now just to think how many levels exist in the AQF, what would your answer be? Don't need to tell me, just think about it. And if your answer was 10, then you're spot on. You know, at the moment, and it's been going on for over 2 years, there's a review of the AQF. The government is trying to bring that down to a level of 8 different levels of qualification. But at the moment, there's 10. So let us have a think. What is the lowest level qualification that is nationally recognised that you can do in this country? Well, if you said it was a AQF Level 1, then you would be very right. AQF Level 1 we know as a Certificate 1. Then we think, what is the highest level nationally recognised qualification that you can actually achieve in our country? Well, if your minds are settled on it being an AQF level 10, which is a doctorate, or commonly known as a PhD, then once again you are correct. So now let's hone in our minds on a certificate one, or AQF level learning. What do we think about this person? Let us ask ourselves some questions. What sort of job would a person be doing who's going to do an AQF level 1 or certificate 1 qualification? Well, let's think about our major supermarkets. We've got Woolworths and Coles, and there are others as well. And if I said to you, what is the lowest level position in those organisations, I think that your mind might settle on somebody who stacks the shelves. Now, I can tell you, as a 14-year-old boy who grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, stacking shelves paid a whole lot more than selling newspapers on the side of the road, because I did it all. Let's consider the person who's doing certificate 1. This is the lowest level position in it, and the person in it is new to the job. Let's think about some learner characteristics. Now remember, learner characteristics are defined as qualities that we can ascribe to an individual or a cohort. So let's think firstly about their age. Do you think somebody who's doing an AQF level 1 qualification would be younger or older? Now, for those of you who are thinking, hang on, you shouldn't be able to generalise. When you do generalise, I say to you, there will always be exceptions to the generalisation. But for the purposes of defining learner characteristics, we do generalise. So do we think they're older? Do you think they're younger? Well, I think that they're younger. Let us think about their education. Do you think they have got a lot of education, or do you think they had minimal education? Well, I'm guessing that such an individual would have lower levels of education. We may well find those people did not finish the HSC. Let's think about the experience in commerce and in life. We could assume they have very little experience in commerce, and they have life experience consistent with their age, which would not be as great as perhaps yourself. Do you think they would communicate in complex or in simple language? My view is they would be communicating in simpler language, 1 or 2 syllable words. Now, the next question is, how will they learn? You know, it is said that we learn in one of 3 ways. We hear it, we see it, or we do it. The latter one being called kinesthetic learning. So with somebody like this, I'm generalizing that they would like to hear it, they would like to see it, but they would have to do it, and they would want to do it multiple times. They would predominantly be kinesthetic learners. Do you think they would be used to being trained and assessed? Well, let's think about that. These people have probably left school recently. So I'm guessing that they would be used to learning, and they would be used to being assessed, although they would call them tests. Now, there was a lot of other questions we could ask, such as what is their level of underpinning knowledge, but we won't go there for the purpose of this exercise. Now, let us think about the learner that's a PhD or a doctorate. You know, it's interesting, my sister, when she comes back from seeing the doctor, she always says things like, you know, that guy's an idiot. He knows absolutely nothing at all. And I sit there and think, yeah, he's absolutely an idiot. He's only in the top 0.1% of intelligent people in this country because he holds an AQF level 10 qualification. We know that people with a PhD have a very narrow focus of expertise. But what we do know also is these are very, very smart people. So now let us ask the same questions of the people that hold the PhDs. Their age, do we think they will be older or younger? Well, I'm guessing they will be older. I'm not suggesting they're going to be my age, but they will be older than the people doing AQF level 1. What about their education levels? Do you think they'd be high, or do you think they'd be low? Correct. They would have high levels of education, well, they wouldn't hold the level they hold. What about their experience in commerce and life? Often at this level, they would have limited exposure and experience in commerce, but they once again would have life's experiences consistent with their age. So we bear that in mind. Do we think that they would use simple or complex language? But their language would be more complex than that AQF Level 1 person. What about their learning style? How do you think they would learn? Well, at PhD level, those people will be told and they'll see it. They will do it once, but they will learn predominantly from seeing and from hearing. Do you think they're used to being trained? Are they used to being assessed? Are they used to learning? Well, obviously their whole life from when they were 4 or 5 years of age has been learning and being assessed. Now, I pose you a question. Let's assume that your job is to teach first aid. And I know many of you there do teach first aid. And your boss says to you, hey, tomorrow, I want you to go down to the local box manufacturing company. They've got 10 new people in their receiving dock in the warehouse. And they want to put those guys through the first aid qualification. And then your boss says to you, now the next day, I want you to go to the local university. The 10 PhDs in the engineering department, their first aid needs to be renewed. It's lapsed. The fundamental question that I want to ask here is, would you do the same in terms of your facilitation on first aid against those 2 different AQF levels, or would you do things differently? Now, me, I would do things differently. There'd be a lot of things I'd do different, but let's just look at a couple of fundamental ones. First thing is how I would dress. I wouldn't dress the same if I was going to teach a bunch of souls in the receiving dock or dispatch dock of a large warehouse. I would be very, very casual, probably jeans and t-shirt or something close to what they're wearing. Whereas if I go into a university, I'm going to be more casually dressed. Now, I'm not going to put on a suit and a tie, but I'm going to be smarter. I'm going to be smarter in how I look. What about the language I use? The language I use will be quite different. I will use more complex language when I'm dealing with the more senior AQF level people than what I would be using on the warehouse people. And that's no slight on anybody, it's just the language that people understand. And lastly, in this area, what about the examples I use? You know, if I'm teaching first aid in an environment which is a warehouse, I might be using examples of forklift incidents or of trips and falls or of lifting. Whereas if I'm in a university, I may be using examples more along the lines of stroke and heart attack. What do you think would happen if we talk to an AQF level 10 person as though they're an AQF level 1 person? Well, I say to you that after a very short period of time, they would switch off. They would think, this person doesn't understand that I knew this stuff when I was 6 years of age. Conversely, if we were to talk to the AQF level 1 people as though they were an AQF level 10 people, after just a few short minutes, you'd have those people going, this is a space monkey, and they would switch off and start talking amongst themselves. So what we must make sure is that all trainers are aware of learner characteristics. Learner characteristics are singularly one of the most important elements of both design and of facilitation. Now, when I started delivering TAA 40104, which is quite a long time ago, I can remember standing out in front of the group the first time, and I was talking about AQTFs and AQFs and NCVERs, and I had absolute blank faces in the room. And that's basically because the language that I had used was vet language, and I was dealing with people who were not involved in vet. Now, I say to you all here, you really need to go and review the AQF. It has got a wealth of information. You find that at aqf.edu.au, and it'll give you a host of things about it, including volume of learning. Now, I'm not going to dive today into the AQF with any depth, because you see that will form the basis of a professional development session yet to come. I've had quite a few people ask whether we could run a session on the AQF. Now, let us go back to our hierarchy of qualifications, and let us now look at AQF Level 2, which we call a Certificate 2. Now, what do we know? Well, let's look at who would be doing a Certificate 2. On the one hand, it could be the person that did the AQF Level 1 with us. They're now in the job, and they've been in that job for a while, and they show promise for the future. So what do we know here? This person has knowledge they didn't have when they went into the Certificate 1. They understand the policies and the procedures. They understand who's who in the organisation. They understand what has to be done, and they understand their job function. And that is one of the pathways that we could look at, the learner characteristics appropriate to that. But let's look at a second. It can be somebody who's starting at a basic trade level. They're a Certificate 2 basic trade qualifications. And so this is a different set of learner characteristics. Let me give you a third pathway. It can be somebody who's doing vet-in school programs. And as you know, in different parts of this country, they offer different subjects or different qualifications. Up north in Queensland, they have hospitality. Down south in Victoria, they'll often have agricultural qualifications. So wherever you are will determine what the vet-in school programs are. So we see at AQF Level 2, we see that there are 3 different pathways, which means 3 different sets of learning characteristics, because they're simply not the same. It's 3 different cohort groups. So what you have to do as a facilitator, and indeed if you're a designer, is identify the cohort group, identify the questions which are appropriate to how you should be as a facilitator. Remember this, the word facilitate. This is a word that has the root word is facile. And facile means to allow to flow. So what we have as a facilitator, you must allow knowledge to flow. That's your job. And your job is to make sure that knowledge flows at the fastest, easiest rate possible, and that the person that's receiving it knows how to understand and interpret what you're saying. Let us move down the AQF. Let's go to AQF Level 3. Now, at this level, which is a Certificate 3, in an enterprise, we have somebody who is a leading hand. They might be a supervisor. So if we went back to our hypothetical loading dock, we would have a leading hand there on each one of the shifts. And that person might be responsible for the activities of 2 or 3 people, maybe 4 people. That person themselves will still be hands-on. They will still be doing what the others do, but their job is to make sure that the people are doing their task properly and that they're not in harm's way. That would be one cohort that would be doing a Certificate 3. It could be somebody who wants to do a more senior level of learning. And for example, somebody might want to now become a fully fledged motor mechanic. So to that extent, they would certainly enroll in Certificate 3. Or maybe they want to become a hairdresser or a bricklayer or a carpenter. All of these things that you'll find, Certificate 3 is where those people will enroll. And we think about those people. I mean, if we look at the leading hand in an enterprise versus those that are doing a Certificate 3 as a traineeship or as an apprenticeship, we immediately can see that there are differences in the learner characteristics. And when we know somebody's doing a traineeship or an apprenticeship, generally speaking, these will be younger people. Where those that are in an enterprise at the supervisor's level, they will be more mature and have had more birthdays than the others. So let us now move to where it starts to get a little more complicated. Certificate 4 or AQF Level 4. Now, in this area, we see 3 distinct different cohorts. The first is somebody who aspires to have an advanced understanding of a particular discipline. where you might have a trade where everybody doing it a Cert 3 as a trainee and or as an apprentice, they want a more advanced level of learning. And so they would then enroll in a Certificate 4. That's one cohort. In an enterprise, what we're talking of here is people who are in junior management roles. So these people now are bound to an office. They will walk out into their little domain time to time, but they're in an office. And what those people are doing is ensuring the productivity is what it should be. They're dealing with the day-to-day problems which arise in an operational sense. Those are the people that are probably the most worried in this area. Let us look at the third pathway, you, a trainer and an assessor. You want to be or you are a trainer and assessor. And let me say to you now, I believe being a trainer and an assessor in the vocational education and training environment is the most wonderful job in this whole country, because here we help people achieve their dreams. So if we look at each of those three pathways, those different cohorts, can you see a difference? I mean, if we thought of somebody in a junior management versus you, is there a difference? Well, you certainly have a very strong area of understanding and learning. Let us move up the AQF. Let's now go to AQF Level 5. You and I know that as a diploma. At this level, we've now entered into a new range of learner characteristics. We're talking about somebody that is going to an advanced discipline. This is somebody that needs to know way more, and they want the depth and breadth or scope of what they learn to be greater. They will become an authoritative figure in that area. Likewise, this can be somebody who's in middle management in an enterprise. Now, you think about middle management, this is a person that's office bound. And this person is measured by key performance indicators, which are numbers. What's the churn rate of your staff? What's the absentee rate of your staff? What was your productivity? What was your delivered in full on time? These are the sorts of things that that area is measured by. You'll find all of a sudden that these people are quite serious. So there is no wasting of time with these people. They simply want it to be serious and don't waste my time. Take the smallest amount of time necessary. Let us move up to AQF Level 6. This is an advanced diploma or an associate degree. So once you get there, you are seeing massive changes to learner characteristics. You've got committed people. They're committed to what they do, and they're very, very knowledgeable. They're seen as authoritative, completely and utterly authoritative. They have a specialty which is strong, and they are in a role where they're going to suggest to more senior management changes to company policy, changes to company procedure. You find that this level person sits and chairs meetings and committees. Moving forward, we go to AQF Level 7. This is a degree at university, and there is no vocational education and training equivalent at AQF Level 7. We used to have a qualification at 7, but it's been lumped into the next line, which is AQF Level 8. So AQF Level 8 is a graduate certificate or a graduate diploma. And at this level, you now have people who create policy. You have people who are responsible for the safety of large numbers, people who have legal liability and responsibility that go with that task. Now, we know vocational education and training ceases at AQF Level 8. So moving forward, we're now in the domain of universities. AQF Level 9 is a master's, and AQF Level 10, as we've discussed, is a doctorate or a PhD, as we like to call it. Now, the AQF is directly related to learner characteristics, which are then related to design and how a trainer facilitates. You must ensure that whenever you're in front of a group or an individual, that you do in fact pay attention to the learner characteristics of your cohort. Let us now consider a training course. It could be any training course. if you look at what goes into a training course, there's stuff you need to know and there's stuff you need to do. We call that practical and knowledge. So things you do and things that you need to know. And if we consider that we know that we assess practicum by having somebody do an activity, and we assess knowledge by asking questions. Now, if you look at the horizontal line that we've shown on the board, you'll see that one end of this is theory and one end of it is practical. So what I want to do is I want to consider a couple of courses, and let's plot whether they're more practical or they're more theory. Now, let us say we're going to teach somebody how to dig a hole. Do we think that's more practical or do you think it's more theory? Now, some people will say that it's wholly practical, but indeed there are elements of theory that we would want to juxtapose into the course. Let us think about what that might be. Safety, how to use the implements, when to change from a shovel to a mattock, when to ask for help. So we see this is about 75% practical and 25% theory as a course. You might think it's a couple of percent either way, and we have no issue with that. Let us plot the second course. The second course is to teach somebody how to supervise 10 people. Now, we know that this person needs to know everything that the person digging the hole needs to know. You cannot supervise people if you don't understand and can do the job that they are doing. Thus, we need to teach them what the first person knows. And I ask you, are there other things that we would now throw into this course? Well, what about the rights of the employee, the rights of an employer? What to do if somebody appears to be affected by drug addiction? What do you do if somebody is late? There's a bunch of other theory that we would put into this. So we actually plot this course at about 50% theory and 50% practical. Let's plot a third course. I'm going to teach you how to design the two courses, one of which will be used to teach the person how to dig the hole, the other will be used to teach the supervisor how to manage 10 people digging the hole. So we know that this person is going to need to know all the stuff that the other people need to know. Are there other things we're going to need to teach them? Well, how to design, how to assess for competence. We see this as about 75% theory and 25% practical. Now, on our vertical line, we will look at this at the amount of knowledge that somebody must hold. On the very bottom, we're going to say somebody holds nil knowledge, nil understanding. So if I wanted to talk to you about the law of tort, and I'm sure you'd be less interested than I am, then you would have probably nil knowledge in that area. At the other end of the spectrum, let's think about somebody that has all of the knowledge in the known universe on the given subject. So let us describe a horizontal line across the middle. This line I'm going to call competence. So let us think, if somebody is beneath that line, we call those people not competent. And if somebody is above that line, we call that person competent. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're partially above that line, whether you're wholly above that line, there are no degrees of competence. You either are competent or not competent in VET because it is competency-based training. We do know that some government-owned RTOs have in the past had distinctions and high distinctions, but these are not recognised. You're either competent or you're not. So let us think about the person who we've taught to dig the hole. How much knowledge about digging holes do they need to have? Do they need to have all that is in the known universe, or do they just need enough to be able to dig the hole? Well, I suggest to you they just need enough to know how to dig the hole. Thus, we put them there. Let us think now about the supervisor, the person that's going to manage 10 people digging holes. Now, I say to you, they need to have greater levels of knowledge. The supervisor does. Oh, that rock is changing from sedimentary to metamorphic. We better put down the shovels, try the mattocks, put down the mattock, let's bring in the jackhammer. Hey, forget the jackhammer, let's bring in the big doof machine. Oh, we got to blow it up. Or alternatively, hey, that says gas, please stop. Or that looks like an Aboriginal artefact. Don't go any further. So their level of knowledge must be greater. Therefore, we're going to plot this at that point. Let us think of the third course, where we have somebody who has learned or is learning how to design these other two courses. I suggest to you that this person needs to know just about all there is about that subject, or they won't be able to appropriately design that course. Thus, we place them there. So now let us look. This lower one, what we've done here, this is a certificate 1. The person digging the holes is certificate 1. Let's look at the next line. Here we have a certificate 3. It's a supervisor of people. We move now to our designer. Here we have a certificate 4. It is a person that's doing training or designing training and assessment. So what you see here is the AQF in motion against the same subject, which basically was digging holes. Now, before I move on, I want to just give you my 3 rules for design. You don't find these in any units of competency. You won't find them in any training package. You won't find them anywhere except on this camera. My first rule is never design anything that you cannot be assessed. Now, you'd say to me, Harold, nobody would be stupid enough to design something which cannot be assessed. Well, let's see if you can relate to this. You're my trainer, and we're an enterprise. We are a transport company. We have hundreds of trucks doing local deliveries and interstate deliveries, and we have a customer service area of 80 people. I'm the general manager, and I'm getting phone calls all the time. I'm sick and tired of your company. Your people say they will call me back, and they do not. You told us our parcels will be delivered at 3 o'clock. It's now 4 o'clock. They haven't arrived. Why am I waiting endlessly on the telephone for somebody to pick up at your end? And so it has gone on. It's gone on now for over a week. And out of pure frustration, I've called you, my trainer. And I've said, you, are we still paying you every week? And you go, yes, boss, I am. I go, well, why? Because clearly you're not doing your job. And you go, why? And I explain to you what I'm going through with phone calls. We're losing business. And I say to you, I want you to go down there to our customer service people. They've forgotten how to do their job. I want you to go down there and I want you to retrain them into what we expect to be done. So you go down to the customer service manager and say, look, I need to divide the group into 2. Give me 40 people in the training room. The others will cover them off for now, and then we'll switch over. And you get those people into the training room. You go, look, the boss is into me. Let's just go back to how this works. Now, you know we've got screens up above the ceiling. These tell you how many calls are waiting, the average call time, how long you've been on the phone, and there's all sorts of other data if you've never been into a call centre to see. And at the end of it, I've gone through how the process works, or you have, I should say, and you say, so have you got it? And you go, yeah, boss, off you go. And you do the second group, and you come back to me and say, boss, I fixed that. I have trained those people. But the only problem with that, of course, is where is the assessment to identify competence has been achieved? Now, it may not be something that complete. It could be something as simple teaching somebody an IT system. And rather than show them and get them to assess, you just do it for them. But they will never learn that way. So my first rule, never design anything that cannot be assessed. Second, never design where you're not an expert. If you're asked to design in something as a subject, a vet qualification, you're not an expert in it, you need to bring in an industry expert to assist you in the understanding of the qualification. And my third rule, validate, validate, validate. You can never validate too much. So what do we mean by validate? Well, we prove it's right. We prove it's right. And we do that by validating, by consulting with various people around us. Let's move on now to standard 1.12, which says the RTO offers recognition of prior learning to individual learners. You see, it doesn't say might offer or could offer or may offer. It just says you will offer. So you have to offer recognition of prior learning. In fact, at the moment in this country, we have specialist RPL companies who enter into auspiciating arrangements with RTOs. We've been approached several times. I've said no in each instance simply because I'm quite risk averse on that matter. RPL is something nearly every other learner claims to have. And I can tell you, HBA back years ago used to get 20 or 30 a day. And most of them were ridiculous. And one day I had spent 3.5 hours on one claim, told the individual that there was no RPL evidence there, for them to say, look, don't worry, I've sent it to 10 different companies. One of them will give me the qualification. At that point in time, we put the price on the RPL assessment, which then comes off of the actual final total if they do enroll. Everyone knows what RPL is, and most folk have it if you ask them. Now, as assessors, we know there are 3 categories that we put into RPL. The first one is called credit transfer, and this is very simple, isn't it? Credit transfer exists where a unit of competency has been done in another qualification or perhaps just in isolation. And so we cannot make you redo it, and we don't want to make you redo it. Here you simply get a credit transfer. And sometimes credit transfers can be a little bit complex because you have to follow the pathway of supersession. So the evidence you require for a credit transfer is pretty straightforward. You need a copy of the testimony. Give me a copy of your statement of attainment and or the statement of results. The second one that I look at, I do call RPL, which is where you've done a unit of competency which sits above a subordinate unit. Now, this is a bit tricky because not all diploma units will sit over the certificate 4 units, because certificate 4 is about doing, and often the diploma is about managing those that do. But we do know, for example, in the LLN area, if you've done the diploma of LLN, unit, I should say, then you will find that will sit over the requirements of the LLN 411. And so here, once again, the evidence required is very simple. But if we now look at the third category, which is sometimes part of my nightmare, we call it recognition of current competency. This is where you have learned to do this on the job in days gone by. Now, when you did your assessment 502 unit, design and develop assessment tools, you would have had to have designed an assessment tool for recognition of current competency. So we look at each of the elements that are required and what evidence can be offered against those units. Now, remember, last session we looked at the rules of evidence. And so this is really important when you're doing RPL, that the evidence is valid, it's sufficient, it's current, and it's authentic. Without that, it isn't evidence, it's something else, it's bits of paper or whatever, but it's not evidence. Now let us deal with how Rcc works. I'm going to use an example. I will say to you here, this example is not lawful, nor is it real, but it will identify for you how recognition of current competency works. I grew up in country Victoria. We had a very, very large farm. And my father came to me when I was 8 years of age, and he said, son, your uncle and I need a bit of help. What we want to do is sit you in the truck. We want to put a pillow under your backside and a couple of bits of wood under your feet. We're going to teach you how to select first gear, and we want you to drive around the paddocks. And your uncle and I will be out the back. We'll throw the hay out for the cattle because it's tough times. So I started doing that, right? When I was 10, Dad came to me and he said, son, what I want you to do is I want you to drive the ute down to the front gate, which is 1 kilometre from the homestead, and the stock and station agent will deliver what we've ordered, turn the ute around, they'll load it in the back of the ute, you bring it back up here for me. Then when I was 12, Dad said to me, look, the stock and station agent no longer will deliver to our farm. So I need you to take the pickup twice a week into town. It's 50 k's there and 50 k's back. Stop outside the stock and station agent. They will load the stuff into the back for you, you bring it back here. And by the time I got to be 16, Dad said, look, forget this school stuff. What I want you to do, we're going to teach you how to drive the VW. And I want you on Sundays to take the cattle down to Shepparton markets and come back. And then on Wednesdays, I want you to go to Flemington markets in Sydney and come back and drop the cattle at those two places. So I started doing that at 16 years of age. Now here I am. I'm now 60 years of age. I've never had anything go wrong. I've never had an incident, never had an accident, never had any interaction with the police at all. Now, by contrast, let's think about another person. 6 weeks ago, that person decided they wanted to learn how to drive a truck. So they went to a truck driving school. They had 10 lessons, and they and I both turned up at the registry at the same time on the same day. Now, here's the fundamental question with recognition of current competency. Should we both have to do exactly the same thing? Or really, shouldn't I just be able to prove that I've been driving a truck for all these times and I'm competent in driving a truck? Now, I repeat, that's unlawful and it's not real. But I use that to highlight what recognition of current competency is. Now, when you're assessing an RPL claim, the first thing you've got to make sure is you're 100% sure. Because once you've issued a qualification, it's very difficult to withdraw it without finding yourself in a court of law. So remember this, that if you say yes when you should have said no, and somebody gets hurt, then you deserve the full weight of the law to be brought against you. You won't find yourself in trouble for saying no if you should have said yes. It will simply be appealed as a decision and another assessor will look at it. But remember, there are civil and criminal cases which can adjoin an assessor should somebody get seriously hurt because of a qualification that you've given them. So I now would like to run a Kahoot quiz for you. We have asked whether you have loaded this down onto your mobile phone. If not, you can minimize your window and open it up. Kahoot.it will find it. We'll just give 2 minutes for everybody to find it. NK, we don't know who you are, but congratulations to you, NK. So, everybody, you know, it's football season now. And so what I thought I would do is share with you something I heard many years ago. In Melbourne, there was a trainer called Ron Barassi. Ron Barassi was a fabulous speaker, apart from being a great trainer of AFL. And I remember his team was down at half-time. And he said to them, if you just 10% try and you lose, it's a shame. If you 50% try and you lose, it's a shame. But if you 99% try and you fail, you should be ashamed, because it only takes 1% for you to succeed. In vocational education and training, we all have to work so hard to make sure everything is as it should be. I thank you and hope to see you at our third session. Oh, by the way, there is a video available of the first session on our website if you go onto the blog, and this will be placed there sometime next week. All the best to you.